My husband cheated on me. As I packed my bags, I found an old phone tucked in the corner. Its text messages were frozen in time, 10 years prior, filled with the blazing, unbridled love of 18-year-old Arthur Ling for me. On an impulse, I typed a line, "I hate you." The SIM card had long been abandoned. I didn't expect a reply. It was merely an outlet for my anger. Yet the next second the phone lit up. "Evis, I'm Soda. Don't hate me." Arthur Ling, my childhood neighbor, my husband, a notorious playboy. In the 5 years of our marriage, I'd grown accustomed to the endless string of beautiful women flocking to his side. He seemed to take delight in making me jealous, constantly chasing new lovers to vex me. This time was no different. Ms. Wen, today's entertainment headlines. My assistant set a stack of newspapers on my desk. I glanced over them, and the top photo alone was enough to make my head throb. Arthur Ling's chiseled jaw was tight. A delicate woman standing beside him, her scarlet gown blazing like fire in the light. Ling Corporation's stock price had already been slumping lately, yet Arthur still found the time to throw an extravagant birthday party for a woman on a yacht, spending a fortune just to make her smile. My assistant stood before the desk as if she had more to say, but I waved her off. She hesitated, then left, glancing back every step of the way. The blood-red headline on the newspaper seared my eyes like a red-hot brand. Thanks to the young Mr. Ling, my work efficiency plummeted, and I was forced to take an urgent business trip. I got home at midnight after working overtime and packed a few things for the trip. My gaze fell on the old phone still tucked in the corner. On a whim, I pressed the power button. It still had battery. Its messages were frozen 5 years ago, Arthur Ling's sweet nothings still flashing on the screen. Now they felt like 1,000 sharp needles stabbing at my eyes. I typed a message on a whim, "I hate you." Arthur hadn't used this SIM card in years. I knew there'd be no reply, but I needed to send it a release for the pent-up resentment festering in my chest for so long. And the next second the phone vibrated. "Why, Iris? Don't hate me. What did I do wrong? I'll fix it, I promise." "It's me, Arthur Ling." "Iris, are you so angry you've lost your mind?" A flurry of messages popped up on the other end, but my mind went completely blank. Only 18-year-old Arthur Ling called me Iris. The person on the other end was the Arthur Ling of 10 years ago. Before I could press for answers, the faint sound of a key turning in the lock drifted in from the hallway. I stepped out of the room at the noise. The lights flicked on, and in the sprawling living room, Arthur Ling stumbled in, his arms slung around a woman's waist. "Ah!" Her scream shattered the villa's silence. "What's all the fuss about?" Arthur mumbled, leaning against her, his eyes opening in irritation. He shoved her away, nearly losing his balance, and when he steadied himself he saw me standing in the living room. Our eyes met. He averted his gaze, seemingly guilty, then straightened his back, defiant. "I thought you'd be working overtime at the company. Turns out you're free enough to loiter at home. Your husband's out whining and dining clients every day, and you can't even be bothered to share the burden." He frowned, his words dripping with blame. I pinched the bridge of my nose, exhausted, with no energy to argue. "Arthur Ling, I don't care if you're out with clients. But I just got home from working overtime and I still have to pack for a business trip tomorrow. I'm tired. I need to rest." My temper snapped when I saw their unremoved shoes, and the stark gray footprints marring my brand new white carpet. "Besides, I warned you, don't bring your little flings into this house. Did you just turn a deaf ear to me?" Arthur's face contorted with anger. "If I can't bring her home, do you expect me to sleep on the street? What's wrong with this house? If I want to, I can gift it to Stella right now." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. He clamped his jaw shut, stunned. I must have looked heartbroken, otherwise why would Arthur flinch, hesitating to step forward and touch me? "How generous of you, Mr. Ling, gifting a house like it's nothing." I lowered my head, forcing my swirling emotions under control, then turned to him with my usual cold, fake smile. "Then please make time to handle the property transfer formalities. After all, this is still our marital joint property. Until you do that, you can't give it away." With that, I grabbed my suitcase and walked straight past them. "Iris, when..." Arthur reached out, trying to grab me. I sidestepped him, slipped on my shoes, and before closing the door, I left him with one final, icy remark. "I hate it when things with my name on them get tainted by garbage." 3 After leaving the villa, I found a 24-hour cafe nearby. My head throbbed so badly I finally called my brother to pick me up. While waiting for Judwin, I pulled out the old phone again. Dozens of new messages lit up the screen. Iris, why aren't you replying? Iris, please don't be angry, okay? The last one read, Iris, I love you. I stared at the words and typed in the chat box, no you don't. The reply came in an instant, impossible. The second the message appeared, the old phone died, its battery completely drained. Coincidentally, Jude walked into the cafe right then. He started complaining the second he stepped through the door. Iris, what are you doing playing runaway in the middle of the night? He rambled on and on even after we got in the car. Go, can I get some sleep? I cut him off. Seeing how haggard I looked, Jude fell silent at once, turning off the blaring stereo. I closed my eyes, my mind a whirl of chaos and clarity. Arthur and I had known each other since childhood, but we were never really childhood sweethearts. He was my neighbor. While I spent every day dizzy from endless art and talent classes, he loved rounding up his friends in the compound to play the local tyrant. I disliked him, his shouts and those of his friends always woke the stray kitten I'd been secretly feeding. We barely interacted until we entered the same high school and became classmates. And he hadn't changed one bit. He was a terrible student, and he brought his tyrant act into the classroom, making our class the worst behaved in the grade. But the school could do nothing about it. After all, he was the young master of the Ling family. Things changed in our second year of high school, when Uncle Ling brought home an illegitimate son, a straight-A student, polite and well-mannered. Aunt Ling saw him as a mortal threat and began cracking down on Arthur, demanding perfection in everything, hoping he'd step up and outshine the illegitimate son. Arthur finally felt the pressure, desperate to hold on to his birthright. Unfortunately, he was simply not cut out for studying. So his mother turned her gaze to me, her neighbor, Arthur's classmate, the top student in the grade with a perfect record. Add to that the fact that the Lings and Wens were old family friends, and my mother and Aunt Ling were close confidants, and the pieces fell into place. Aunt Ling came to me, saying that if I agreed to tutor Arthur, the Ling family would be forever grateful to the Wens, and would reward me handsomely. My parents found out and they only cared about the reward. So I had no choice but to agree. But Arthur wasn't just a bad student, he was a distraction. The teacher seated him next to me and his favorite pastime was pestering me while I studied. You have an older brother to take care of everything. Why bother working so hard? I bit my tongue the first few times but he never let up. Finally I snapped back. You have a younger brother nipping at your heels. Why bother begging me to tutor you then? Arthur's face turned bright red, his eyes blazing with anger. He slammed the classroom door and stormed out, ignoring the teacher's livid expression. Watching him flee humiliated, I felt a twinge of regret. I just poured salt on his wounds. I thought Arthur would never speak to me again, but the next day he acted as if nothing had happened, greeting me casually and sliding a note onto my desk. Iris, I was wrong yesterday. I apologize. I'm sorry. I huffed, ignoring him but slipped the note into my bag anyway. After that, our relationship found a fragile balance. He started studying earnestly, so much so that even the teachers were impressed. He scored just shy of the first-tier university cutoff in the first mock exam, and I finally saw him in a new light. How's that? Not bad, right? He said, grinning. I nodded lightly. His smile grew even more cocky. On the day the results came out, Arthur ran to my building and shouted up to my window, Iris, be my girlfriend. I pretended not to hear, but my ears burned red. That young man's sincere, fiery gaze, his unbridled shouts, they melted my heart. We went to universities in different cities over 200 kilometers apart, but the distance couldn't dim Arthur's passion. He visited me almost every week, making me take him around the city, leaving his mark everywhere we went. Arthur would hold me close and say he loved how lively I became with him, nothing like the serious, old-fashioned girl I'd been in high school. And I'd pretend to be angry, pinching his cheek hard until he begged for mercy. 5. Hey Iris, wake up. Don't scare me. A voice pulled me from my thoughts and I frowned in irritation. I forced my eyes open, met with a pair of worried eyes. Jude's hand rested gently on my forehead and he sighed helplessly. Yee. My voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. You have a fever. I'll take you to the hospital. I shook my head. No, just let me rest. Take me home. My brother hesitated as if he had more to say, then finally gave in. When we got home, he tucked me into bed and left the room. I plugged in the old phone, and the second it turned on, a text popped up. "You're not Iris Wen. Who are you?" I smiled to myself as I read it. Arthur Ling had never liked studying, but he was sharp. He'd figured it out that fast. After a moment's thought, I replied, "I am Iris Wen, but the 28-year-old version." There was a long silence on the other end, as if he was processing the impossible. Minutes later, the screen flickered. "Did future me marry Iris Wen? Are we happy?" I stared at the words, falling silent. It took me a long time to type back, "No. You cheated on me." He refused to believe it, firing back at once, "Impossible. I'll love Iris forever." Moments later, another text came, "I've already planned it all. I'm going to give Iris the most spectacular proposal ever. After we marry, I'll let her be herself, do whatever she loves. We'll be happy, I promise." "You're lying." His words about the proposal made me pause, memories flooding back. I was 23 then. He'd insisted on throwing me a birthday party, saying he had a surprise. On the day of my birthday, Arthur blindfolded me, led me out of the car, and guided me step by step across wooden planks until I stood on something that swayed gently beneath my feet. "Nervous?" he asked, his voice feigning calm, though his palm, pressed over my eyes, was slick with sweat. "No. I shuklat sufli." "Little liar," he murmured, his warm breath brushing my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. "I'm terrified." I'd thought there was nothing to be nervous about, and yet a seed of anticipation had sprouted in my heart all the same. Even with the faint expectation, I still clapped a hand over my mouth when he lifted the blindfold and I saw what lay before me. I was standing on a yacht, surrounded by a carpet of red roses, every detail arranged exactly to my taste. Even the stuffed animals I'd once mentioned loving were tucked into every corner. Our families and closest friends were there too, each holding a white heart-shaped balloon, their eyes soft with warm wishes for me. I stood there in a daze, my mind blank. Then Arthur dropped to one knee beside me, a diamond ring in his hand, his eyes filled with nothing but love as he spoke my name. "Iris. You're the most wonderful girl in the world. Only with you do I feel alive, like my life has meaning. All my happiness, it's all from you. Only you deserve my whole heart, my endless love. Iris, marry me. Give me the chance to make you happy forever." His heartfelt words still echoed in my ears, clear as day. And now, on the old phone, 18-year-old Arthur was still arguing with me. "We've been through so much together. I could never cheat on you." I whispered to myself, "Yeah. We walked so far together. How did we end up here?" 6 I came down with a terrible fever, spending days in a delirious sleep, stirring only for brief, muddled moments. Poor Jude, my brother, who lived for freedom and hated being tied down, fought to keep me alive, nursing me day and night, no rest for the weary. By the 4th day, when I finally regained full consciousness, Jude looked gaunt, his cheekbones sharp, visibly thinner than before. He grumbled non-stop about demanding a caregiver's fee, and I rolled my eyes at his antics, my gaze drifting unconsciously to my phone. The old phone was flooded with unread messages, but my regular phone held nothing but work emails, not a single message from that familiar name. Jude saw me staring at the screen and fell silent, stirring the cereal in his bowl slowly, the spoon clinking softly against the ceramic. After a long pause, he spoke hesitant, "Song. You and Arthur Ling." "Goo." I cut him off, my voice steady. "If I get a divorce, will you support me?" Jude froze for a split second, then scooped up a spoonful of cereal as if nothing had happened, his tone casual. "Do whatever you want. It's your life." I knew it was time to go to Ling Corporation. I'd been missing for 4 days. Jude had notified my assistant Anna for me, but as expected, a mountain of work that required my personal approval had piled up, decisions no one else could make. My assistant had bombarded me with WeChat messages, desperate, making me fear she'd jump off the building with the vulture-like shareholders if I didn't return soon. The second I pushed open the door to my office, I saw Arthur Ling sitting in my chair, flirting with Stella Liu, and the headache I'd only just shaken off came crashing back. I glanced at Anna, whose face was etched with misery, and I was certain Arthur and Stella were at the top of her list of people to strangle. "If Mr. Ling wants to use this office, I'll take my leave. Anna, arrange a new office for me," I said, turning to walk out at once. A chair scraped against the floor behind me, followed by a woman's gasp, and Arthur's angry voice cut through the air. Iriswyn, have you had enough of your tantrums? I just said one wrong thing. Is that really reason enough to disappear on me? A hand suddenly grabbed my arm and I stumbled, unprepared for the force of it. Arthur was furious, his grip tight, and I winced in pain, my eyebrows knitting together. Nothing happened between me and her. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? If she hadn't taken me home that night, I would have slept on the street with no one to care. I was miserable and you just gave me the cold shoulder, then ran away without a word. Did you even stop to think about how I felt? Did you ever wonder if I was worried about you? His accusations slammed into me one after another. He stood before me red-faced, aggressive, his voice raised, and my head throbbed so badly I could barely stand it. In a daze, his angry face blurred, shifting into the tender, loving man who'd knelt before me on the yacht, begging me to marry him. Then I saw 18-year-old Arthur, his eyes bright and sincere, saying, "Iris, I love you." Finally, the teenage Arthur faded away, leaving only the 28-year-old man in front of me, cold, selfish, unrecognizable. The searing pain in my head vanished in an instant, replaced by a bone-deep calm. I spoke slowly, clearly, my voice unwavering. "I'm not throwing a tantrum, Arthur Ling. I hate dirty things. And I hate it when someone dirties what's mine. Let's get a divorce." 7 Arthur's snarl of "You're dreaming," and the deafening crash of the door slamming shut left the office in blessed silence at last. I watched his retreating back, then made up my mind I would never use this office again. Not after he'd sat in my chair. It felt tainted. "Anna, have someone deep clean this office." "I'll work from the conference room," I said, my gaze fixed on the door Arthur had stormed through, my voice flat. "Right away, Ms. Wen," Anna replied, letting out a huge sigh of relief, hurrying to obey. The old phone pinged again, another message from 18-year-old Arthur. He begged to know what had happened between future him and me, what had led to this. I told him briefly about what had unfolded in the office that day. Silence fell on the other end. No more messages came. I knew why he was quiet. This teenage Arthur knew exactly how bad my germophobia was. He'd seen it firsthand many times. Once, a girl had confessed to him, reaching out to grab his hand. He'd pulled away at once, but I'd seen it and I'd ignored him all day. The next day, Arthur had shown up with his arm bright red, raw, even oozing a little blood from being scrubbed too hard too many times. He'd looked at me with those big, sad eyes, like an abandoned puppy, and said, "Iris, I scrubbed it clean. Please don't hate me. Please don't be disgusted by me." To 18-year-old Arthur, what future him had done was unthinkable, unforgivable. He could not accept that he would ever become that man, the one who'd hurt me so deeply. As for me, my resentment toward Arthur had reached a breaking point, fueled by the endless tabloid gossip and the business deals that had fallen through because of his recklessness, his carelessness. I managed to power through the urgent decisions, forcing myself to ignore Anna's desperate, pleading looks as she stared at the mountain of PR work left by Arthur's scandals, then stood and left the building. I drove to the Wen family's old mansion. For years, my parents had adopted a hands-off attitude toward my marriage, indifferent, uninvolved, letting me handle it on my own. But after Arthur's yacht birthday party for his mistress fiasco, they called me home for the first time, their tone unyielding. In the living room, my parents sat stiff and straight on the sofa, silent. Even Jude had dropped his usual playful act, his face serious. The heavy atmosphere settled over me, thick and suffocating. I sat down on the couch and for the first time in a long while I felt nervous. "What do you intend to do about Arthur Ling?" my father asked, sipping his tea, his voice giving nothing away, no hint of anger or worry or anything at all. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, and found the courage to say the words I'd been turning over in my mind for days. "I want a divorce." The word hung in the air and the already quiet living room fell into a deathly hush. Jude met my eyes, then snuck a glance at our parents and spoke up, trying to lighten the mood, to smooth things over. "Dad, song she. Then divorce him," my father said, his voice still flat, still calm. I stared at him in shock. He shot me a sideways glance, then stood, moving toward the stairs. "A daughter of the Wen family will not be treated this way. Will the Ling family really dare to think the Wens are easy to bully?" I met my mother's worried gaze, then Jude's face. He'd let out a huge sigh of relief and a small relieved smile tugged at his lips, and suddenly I wanted to cry. I hadn't cried during our first big fight after marriage. I hadn't cried when I first found out he'd cheated. I hadn't even cried when I'd made the final decision to let go of Arthur Ling. But I cried now, big heaving sobs, and my mother pulled me into her arms, holding me tight. My father stopped mid-step on the stairs, standing there watching me, his eyes soft with unspoken sorrow, with regret, with love. Everyone knew that proposal had meant everything to me. So how dare you, Arthur Ling? How dare you break your promise like this? I took another break from work, this time not because I was sick but by choice. The old phone was still buzzing with messages from 18-year-old Arthur. He'd asked more questions about future him and me, then sensing my reluctance to talk about it, he'd changed the subject, steering clear of the pain. "Is my dad's illness better?" he texted. I hesitated for a long time before replying. "He passed away." I'd never expected him to ask about his father, and I'd had no idea how to answer the question. Because Mr. Ling's death had been the beginning of the end for Arthur and me. It was the second year of our marriage. His father's condition had taken a sudden, sharp turn for the worse. Ling Corporation had descended into chaos overnight. Mr. Ling had long known his eldest son was unfit to run the company, and he'd even considered putting his illegitimate son in charge, letting him take over the business. But my mother-in-law, Mrs. Ling, would never allow it. She'd fought tooth and nail against the idea. After weeks of ruthless calculations, of weighing all the options, I'd become the only logical choice to manage Ling Corporation. And Arthur Ling, now called Mr. Ling by everyone, had slipped into a life of even greater excess than he'd led when his father was alive. No longer did he have to live in constant fear that his father would hand the family business over to his half-brother. His wife was the one running the company now. All he had to do was collect his dividends and indulge in all the pleasures the world had to offer. Why bother with anything else? So he wallowed in his debauchery day after day, keeping his youthful spirit intact, while I wore myself ragged, acting more like a mother than a wife, fretting over the company's future, and his reckless antics outside. Jude would often tease me that after marriage, I hadn't found a husband, but a grown son my own age to raise. I lost my vitality in the endless grind of work, the very vitality Arthur once said only he could bring out in me. Arthur texted again. "What about my mom? How is she?" "She passed away too." It was a long time before he replied. "Iris, don't be too sad." Tears blurred my vision as I read the words. 18-year-old Arthur knew exactly how much Mrs. Ling meant to me. Less than a year after Mr. Ling's death, my mother-in-law died in a car accident. Arthur was devastated, and so was I. Mrs. Ling had always treated me like her own daughter. Ever since we'd been neighbors, she'd loved popping by our house. When she'd seen my tutor slap my hand as punishment, she'd pulled me into her arms, her voice soft with pity, calling me her Nan, her little girl. She'd often say, "Nan, if you can't be my daughter, will you be my daughter-in-law instead?" I'd known what a daughter-in-law was even in primary school. I'd glanced at Arthur, who was running amok outside, and shaken my head furiously. She'd laughed out loud, kissing my forehead. "Then Nan will be my goddaughter." Later, when Arthur proposed to me and our families discussed the wedding date, Mrs. Ling had linked her arm through mine, winking playfully. "Nan ended up being my daughter-in-law after all. Auntie is so happy. How could I not love someone so wonderful?" That's why I'd been so confused by Arthur's accusation that I'd never loved his mother. Back then, he'd grieved her death endlessly, drowning his sorrows in alcohol every single day. But I'd had no time to mourn. I knew Ling Corporation held half of Mrs. Ling's life's work, and now that she was gone, I had to protect what she'd left behind for her. But Arthur couldn't understand that. He couldn't understand why I'd returned to the company before her 7th-day memorial. He couldn't understand how I could face those scheming shareholders with a calm face, no trace of grief. Most of all, he couldn't understand why I couldn't comfort him in his pain, stay by his side through his mother's death. Those were the words he'd shouted at me when I'd caught him cheating for the first time. I'd never understood his logic. I'd married him, shared his burdens, guarded the Ling family for him. Was that not enough? But the conviction in his voice had made me doubt myself, wonder if I really had been in the wrong. Later, all my friends found out about Arthur and me. They'd all urged me to let it go. "This is how marriages are in wealthy families," they'd said. "Everyone plays their own games. Arthur's actually not that bad." Not that bad. But I still remembered every word of his proposal vow clearly. How had it all come to this? Every time I saw him hold another woman act intimate with her right in front of me, I felt split in two, one part the rational wife unfazed by his countless mistresses, the other a broken woman screaming and crying inside. I'd fallen into an unsolvable loop, a prison of my own making. 9 This time I took a full half-month off at home. Worried I'd be left alone with my dark thoughts, my parents and brother had packed me off to Hawaii, my favorite travel destination once upon a time. In Hawaii there was no Mrs. Arthur Ling, no Ms. Wen of Ling Corporation. There was only Iris Wen. For the first time in a long while I breathed a genuine sigh of relief. When I returned to China, Jude came to pick me up at the airport. "Have you checked WeChat lately?" he asked out of the blue. I shook my head. I'd spent the entire time chatting with 18-year-old Arthur. I'd meant to ignore him at first, but he'd talked to me about the Iris he knew, the Iris lost to time, unmarred by the years, unbroken by love. He even remembered tiny details I'd long forgotten. The name of the stray cat I'd fed, my favorite stuffed animal. In his words, I'd caught a glimpse of the girl I used to be, and from her I'd drawn a sliver of life, a spark of courage to face reality. I pulled out my regular phone, which I'd kept turned off the entire trip. It was flooded with so many messages it nearly crashed. After waiting a few minutes for WeChat to load, I replied to a few important people, then noticed Arthur's chat box showed 99 plus unread messages. But I had no desire to open it. To me it was pointless now. "Did you talk to Arthur? Did he agree to the divorce?" I turned to Jude. Before I left the country he'd sworn he'd go to Arthur on my behalf, on our whole family's behalf, and give him an ultimatum. Jude's face twisted into a grimace, like he'd swallowed a fly, and I knew at once that I would have to face Arthur myself, to end this once and for all. "Go drive me back," I said. I meant the marital home, the same house where he'd brought Stella Lou that night. It was a place filled with all our sweetest memories. I'd always wanted to end our marriage there, because it was where Arthur had shattered every beautiful dream we'd ever had of our life together. Before we married, we'd loved huddling together, our heads close, staring at the house's blueprints and dreaming of our perfect future. That house, like the yacht proposal, had meant everything to me. It was the starting point of our home, our life as a couple, but he'd destroyed that starting point. He'd let someone else step into our home, a place we'd once agreed no one else would ever cross the threshold of. So going back there now was not going home. Jude knew the difference between the two, but he only looked at me and said nothing more. The house was surprisingly clean. I glanced around, no sign that Arthur had been back. Was he not home? I looked down at the floor. The gray footprints on the carpet were gone, and the living room windows were wide open, fresh air streaming in. I walked a little further and saw Arthur lying on the sofa. His clothes were disheveled and he reeked of alcohol. He frowned at the sound of my footsteps, slowly opening his eyes. When he saw me he shot upright at once. "Iris." He moved too fast, losing his balance and falling to the floor. But he didn't seem to feel the pain. He scrambled to his feet and rushed to me, throwing his arms around me and sobbing, "Wife, where did you go? I'm sorry, I'll never do it again. Forgive me please. Let's not get a divorce. I only have you." Arthur's grip was like iron, squeezing me so hard it hurt. He held me, crying like a child. His head buried in the crook of my neck, hot tears dripping down my skin and into my collar, soon leaving a dark, wet stain on my shoulder. I hated him like this, because this was his go-to move, every single time he'd cheated and pushed me into a fight. He was an emotional vampire, feeding on my love to soothe his own wounds, then crossing my boundaries over and over again, using my anger and heartbreak to prove I still loved him. But he'd forgotten that I was human too. A person with a fragile heart, a sane mind. This time I would not turn back. I pushed him gently. He lifted his head, his tear-streaked eyes filled with desperate hope. He hoped we'd make up, go back to the way things were. But that ridiculous charade had only lasted because of my love for him. A love he'd now drained completely until there was nothing left. I took a deep breath, summoning all my strength, and pushed him away hard. "I sent you so many divorce papers. Why won't you sign them?" Arthur froze. He stared into my eyes, shaking his head frantically. "No. I won't sign. Iris, I don't agree to the divorce. You're my wife. I only have you. Iris, please. Love me again just one more time." Arthur's eyes were red and swollen as he begged, his voice broken, humbled. I looked at him and my heart ached just a little. Arthur Ling, do you know something? I loved you once. So much. But what did you say? You said you couldn't feel my love for you. Isn't it the truth? Arthur suddenly exploded, his voice rising. Jude jumped in shock, stepping in front of me at once to shield me. Arthur pointed at me, his fingers shaking, his eyes wild with madness, as if I were the one who'd been unfaithful to our marriage. Iris Wynn, you're always so rational. Are you a robot? Where is your heart? 5 years dating, 5 years married, and I feel like I'm the only one who's ever loved you. Arthur shouted, his face contorted with rage and grief. Even when I became your family, even when my mom doted on you like her own daughter, you're just like an actress. The second you step out of the role, no emotion leaves a single trace in your heart. Your eyes are only for work. When mom died, you handled all those company things at her funeral, then left without even looking at me. When you caught me cheating for the first time, what did you say? You called me childish. I saw no anger in your eyes, only coldness. Every single time after that, even when you fought with me, I saw no pain. No pain of being betrayed by the person you love. I froze. So that's what he'd thought all along. I held Jude back, who was furious and ready to lash out. I stood in front of Arthur, who'd sunk to his knees, his head in his hands, and looked down at him. It was the first time I'd ever looked at him from this angle. And I knew with absolute certainty that my love for him was truly gone. This selfish man who blamed everyone but himself for everything, that Arthur Ling had killed the broken, self-pitying woman inside me once and for all. Arthur Ling. My voice was completely calm, no trace of emotion in it. Do you know why I said those things? Because you really are childish to me. And stupid. You childishly used these cruel games to test if I loved you, yet you were too stupid to see my love for what it was. You blame me for not drowning in grief when mom left, but you didn't see the wolves circling Ling Corporation, the very company mom spent her life protecting for you. If I hadn't stepped in to hold it all together, you would have lost the last thing she left you. I sank to my knees slowly, meeting his dazed eyes head-on. And you've seen me cry, haven't you? When I rushed back at dawn to kneel at mom's funeral altar. When you held other women in front of me, flaunting them like trophies. I cried then, didn't I? My voice carried a hint of destructive power, tearing down the fantasy world Arthur had built for himself. I was wrong. You're not stupid. You knew I loved you all along. You were just bitter that a rational me could never give you the reckless, fiery love you craved. You wanted me to lose control, to spiral into madness with you. Didn't you once think that if I cheated on you to get revenge, you could stand before me and forgive me magnanimously? Because that would fit your twisted logic. I would be the one making you jealous with other men, proving I loved you. You wanted us to rot in the mud together. But every time you pulled me down, you only pushed me further away from this mess you created. I don't keep things that are dirty. You know that better than anyone, don't you? I hate dirty things. 10 in the end, the paper still didn't get signed. Anna arrived right then with the divorce agreement. When Arthur saw it, he tore the thin stack of paper to shreds and ran out of the house, screaming like a madman. Anna jumped in shock, frozen in place, staring at me helplessly. I wiped the tears from my face and stood up, speaking to her calmly. It's fine. Prepare another copy. And bring the equity transfer agreement too. She nodded and hurried out of the house, desperate to escape the chaos. Jude shot me a look. Why sell your shares too? I let out a long breath. Goo, Arthur's a sick man now in my eyes. He's not the boy he used to be. If I don't cut all ties, I'll lose myself sooner or later. Iris Wynn would never let herself become a madwoman. The tables had turned. Now Arthur was the one missing. Though I'd been gone to rest, no one knew where he'd run off to. Without Arthur's constant scheming and drama, my life was surprisingly peaceful. Add to that the smooth progress of my departure from Ling Corporation, and I was in the best shape I'd been in years. Anna marveled at the change in me. Since I was leaving, she had no desire to stay at the chaotic old company either. She'd hired a new assistant and was teaching them the ropes hand in hand. Her endless exasperation with the new hire's clumsiness never failed to make me laugh until my sides hurt. There was a small hiccup, of course. With Arthur missing and me on the verge of leaving, tensions flared between the old employees my father-in-law had left behind and those loyal to my mother-in-law. Once I'd been their common target, a single enemy to unite against. Now that the target was gone, the undercurrents of conflict rose to the surface. The two factions tore the company apart, leaving mid-level employees anxious and unsettled. I couldn't bear the thought of my mother-in-law resting uneasily in the afterlife, so I stepped in to mediate one last time. But my last day at the company was fast approaching, and Arthur was still nowhere to be seen. The unrest I'd quelled was on the brink of erupting again. At the debriefing meeting as Ling Corporation's current CEO, I was to give my resignation speech. Everyone was there, all the shareholders, all the executives. Everyone, that is, except Arthur. I took a deep breath, ready to begin, when a flurry of hurried footsteps sounded at the door. I looked up. Arthur was standing in the conference room doorway. He'd lost a shocking amount of weight in the month we'd been apart. The suave, carefree young Mr. Ling was gone, his spirit seemingly drained from his body. His once perfectly tailored suit hung loose on his gaunt frame. He stared at me, his eyes bloodshot, but he didn't move a muscle for the entire duration of the meeting. The debriefing ended without a hitch. One by one the attendees filed out. Arthur and I were left alone in the empty conference room. We sat in silence for a long time, neither of us speaking. It had only been a month apart, but there was nothing left to say between us. I'd tried once to understand Arthur. His family had been a typical arranged marriage, a cold union of pure self-interest, which hadn't stopped my father-in-law from chasing every pretty face in town. But my mother-in-law had loved her husband deeply. When her love went unrequited, she'd poured every ounce of it into her only son, the fruit of her love. She'd built a perfect illusion of a happy family for Arthur, blind to the little boy hiding behind her, crying in secret. Arthur had once held me close and told me he'd felt so sorry for his mother, so in love with a man who didn't love her back. But he'd never dared step forward to wipe her tears, afraid that if he did, the perfect happy family would shatter into pieces. I'd felt so sorry for him then, holding him tight, trying to comfort the scared little boy he'd once been. But I'd never imagined that his parents' broken marriage would shape not just his childhood, but his entire idea of love. He'd come to believe that love meant enduring endless betrayal in silence, like his mother, weeping in secret, never daring to leave. So when Arthur thought I'd stopped putting him at the center of my life after marriage, his paranoia spiraled. And when his mother died, the grief pushed him over the edge into these cruel games to test my true feelings. It was a truth I'd only realized in this past month. But understanding is not the same as forgiveness. When the line between victim and perpetrator blurs, forgiveness becomes impossible. Why do you want to leave the company? Arthur's voice was hoarse, broken. You cared so much about it once. I pushed the divorce agreement across the table to him. I never liked it here, Arthur. You know that. A thought seemed to hit him and he suddenly laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Yeah. How could I forget? You never liked the backstabbing, the lies of the business world. You never liked being trapped in these cold concrete buildings. His laughter died and he buried his face in his hands, sobbing. I promised you I'd let you do what you loved. I promised to make you the happiest wife in the world. How could I forget all that? How could I forget everything? 12 Arthur signed the divorce agreement, but he refused to buy my shares. Call me selfish, he begged. If you hold the shares, I can cling to the delusion that we might fix this. That we might be happy again. Even if it's just a dream. Let me have this reason to keep going. As soon as the divorce was finalized, I booked the next flight to Norway. I'd owed myself this in Aurora. Arthur and I had come here on our honeymoon, but we'd missed the lights. After that, I'd been trapped in the rat race of fame and fortune, never able to escape. Now I wanted to find the Aurora I'd missed all those years. And I wanted to see if, after everything, I could find the girl I'd once been. When the faint, ethereal streaks of colored light unfurled across the dark night sky, I forgot all about taking photos. I just stared transfixed. I was Iris when again. For the first time in years, I felt free, calm, at peace with myself. In that moment, the old phone lit up. A text from 18-year-old Arthur. Don't forgive me. I looked at my shadow on the snow beneath the dancing auroras and smiled. I hadn't loved the wrong person. I just loved a boy who'd stayed 18 forever. 13, are you really never coming back? Jude's furious voice blared from the phone speaker. I turned on loudspeaker and set it down on the table, unconcerned. I filled the kettle, plugged it in, pressed the power button, taking my time with each step before grinning into the phone. What's wrong? Miss me? It had been 2 months since I'd arrived in Norway. Jude scoffed. Miss you coming back to give me a headache? I'm just afraid you'll drop dead out there alone. Then why are you rushing me home? I'm perfectly happy here. Mom and Dad haven't even asked me to come back. You're living the high life. Jude muttered, then changed the subject, his voice suddenly careful. Do you even remember what day it is in a few days? Of course I do, I teased. Your loyal servant will book a flight right away to celebrate your 80th birthday. Happy now? Jude sputtered, cutting me off at once. He said he and our parents would come to Norway to see me instead. I could hear the secret he was hiding in his voice, but I didn't press him. There was only one person who could make Jude act so cautious around me. No one else. I hung up on Jude and sat in silence for a long time, then opened my WeChat chat with Anna. A top graduate of a prestigious university, her storytelling skills were impeccable. She summed up the current mess at Ling Corporation in a few short sentences. Since I'd left, Arthur had officially taken over as CEO. But as his father had once said, he was simply not cut out for business. He'd struggled even to keep the company running smoothly in peaceful times, let alone now when it was mired in endless infighting. He was stretched thin, working himself to the bone. He'd even offered Anna 3 times her salary to stay. After all, she'd been my right hand, and in this time of utter isolation, he had almost no one left to trust. But Anna was smart. She had no desire to stay and get caught in the crossfire. She'd finished the handover and fled the company the second she could. The moment Anna left, Arthur's half-brother stepped out of the shadows. The factional infighting quickly devolved into a bitter brotherly feud. Arthur's brother was clever. My mother-in-law had hated him not just because he was the product of her husband's betrayal, but because he had the power to take everything from Arthur. She'd never stopped crushing him right up until the day she died. And now that I was gone, he finally had his chance to strike back. Anna's message was filled with regret. I've never seen Mr. Ling so helpless. He was a child who'd never grown up. When the people who'd always shielded him left one by one, this was what happened. In the end, I told Anna to meet Arthur in a few days along with Jude, and hand him the power of attorney I'd signed. Aren't you coming back in person? She asked. I shook my head, then remembered she couldn't see me and spoke softly. No. After the aurora faded, my old phone never received another message again. The 18-year-old Arthur Ling was gone, and the story of him and me had come to an end. For the rest of my life, I only want to live for myself.